So we've been looking at these themes in John's Gospel. And one of the things I love about doing this has been the way it helps, just rather than focusing on one Bible reading, enable us to look across many Bible readings and see what they're saying to us. And I want to take you on a bit of a journey, really, because have you ever had a moment where you've followed a river to its very source? Have you ever tried doing that? One or two of you have. I'm getting some nods. Hopefully I'm getting some nods at home. You sort of, well done, Con. Yep. You're sort of wandering along and you sort of get inquisitive and you start following this stream or maybe even a river right to the stream that leads you right to the very beginning of where it all began. And this is a very powerful image within the Bible. I hadn't really looked at it that much before until we came to this theme and we think about spirituality. Because at the very heart of Christian spirituality, you would expect me to say is the person of Jesus, hence the picture on the far left of the screen. This is taken from the great roof in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Some of you have been there. But I want to take you on another journey for a moment. And this is to a place called Banias. You may have not heard of that name before, but you may have heard it by a different name. It's called Caesarea Philippi. And Caesarea Philippi, and I'm looking around you, certain people are nodding their heads. Oh, I've been there, they say. And you have. It's right up in the north of Israel, underneath the lee of the great Mount Hermon. And Caesarea Philippi is where that famous story takes place, where Jesus asks the rest of the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And it's there that Peter says, "You are the Messiah, you are the Christ." And so at the very heart of Christianity is this idea of the person of Jesus. When you look at all the various different sorts of spirituality that are available, Christians focus in on the person of Jesus and this question, who do you say that I am? Strangely though, Banias, I've put another picture up on it, Caesarea Philippi, and a picture underneath. What happened was that there was an earthquake. And this earthquake moved the source of where the water, the fresh ice waters that spring up underneath a big cave, actually moved 200-300 yards down the river. And that to me is a powerful and important sign. Welcome. You're very welcome. Come on in. It's nice to see you. Good to see you. Oh, well, somebody came in, everyone, and then walked out again. But send them our love. Oh, is he a friend of yours, Naomi? Oh, brilliant. Well, he's very welcome. Very welcome. So this place, the source of the waters moved. And they moved to this wonderful waterfall, which is right in the centre of our picture. And I've written more about this in the New Creation Pew News sheet for yesterday. But this waterfall is a very powerful image, because you may have heard mentioned in sermons, mentioned in church, even in your own thinking, about the river of life. There's various songs, isn't there, about the river of life. This is it. This is where it comes from. This waterfall. And this waterfall, I want you to try and take into your mind and into your heart as you think about it. Next one, please, Kirsty. We've looked at this before, about why living water is such a powerful image in the Middle East. This is a picture of a cistern on the far left in a place called Masada. And people built these huge places of storage for water. Because if you're living in a hot country, one of the things you need more than anything else is water. You spend a lot of your day looking for water. And when it rained, and it would only rain once or twice a year in the southern part of Israel, you would store that water in these huge cisterns for month after month. And you would spend ages trying to make sure the daylight didn't get in. because otherwise that would make it all go slimy and green. But the water always tasted stale. But you needed the water in order to survive. How much more then, if you can imagine what that was like, to go to see an amazing river bubbling over stones with oxygen in it, and it was full of life and vigor and fresh. And if you're in a hot country, if you've ever had a bottle of ice cold water given you, it is like being given the crown jewels. And it's beautiful. This is what it is to come to the source of living water. And it's in this mode that I want you to try and imagine what it's like when Jesus stands at the great festival and says, "Come to me, all of you who would like to drink, and I'll give you more than you can possibly imagine or conceive." Isn't that amazing? I know we try and not use bottles of water, but can you imagine a whole drinks cabinet full of water being given to you if you are absolutely thirsty? Or if you've done sport at the end of a game of sport, isn't it an amazing gift simply to have a drink of water? And this is the key word, gift. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Next one, please. Jesus speaks these words that Maria read to us at the end of a great festival. We looked at this a couple of weeks ago, the festival of Sukkot, the festival of tabernacles, the harvest festival at the end of the harvest year in Israel. And he would have stood on Temple Mount, in the great temple. And this temple has an enormous amount of history. Today it houses the Dome of the Rock, if you can see that in the centre of the picture. And I've put up a video that has just come out from that couple, Sergio and Rhoda, who have just been on Temple Mount and done a lot of the journey around the archaeology that is underneath Temple Mount. And it's fascinating. Fascinating stuff. This place has a huge history, a rich history, not just of Muslim community, but of the Christian community and of the Jewish community before all of that. It's even believed that on this mount, underneath that rock, underneath that dome, is where God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, known as Mount Moriah. So it goes right the way back. And then if you roll the story on, there's this old prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 47, which dreams a dream that out of this temple would flow a river. Some of you may know this story, but would flow a river that would be ankle deep at first, and then up to your knees second, and then up to your waist. And indeed, by the time it reached the Dead Sea, it would totally envelop you. And it would transform that salty Dead Sea into a place of life. And there would be trees on either side of the river with leaves that would bring healing to the nations. Some of you will know by reading your Bibles that at the very end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, that dream is fulfilled. That dream is fulfilled as one of the great images of the transformation of the world. That the world will see heaven come to earth, and indeed all things will be made new. Isn't that a powerful image? All right then. I was excited by that. And although the image may or may not grab you, the idea then that this water of life is just not a nice thing you stick on the side. It actually is central to our living and breathing and having our being. That God is, when we have times of spirituality and closeness to Him, trying to bring that new life to each of us. Not just that we're getting in touch with God, not just that we're checking in with him, not just that we want to sort of be on his good side. He's actually wanting to heal, to restore, and to transform each one of us as part of the working out of that Ezekiel 47 dream. This is the essence of prayer. But it comes as a what? As a gift. Next one, please. I want to tell you something else about this Ezekiel 47 dream. Very interestingly, it says, and it's very specific about this, the water will flow out of the east side of the temple. Now, if you're good at your points of direction, north, south, east and west, the reality is that's out of the right side of the temple. Where was Jesus pierced when he died on the cross? Thank you, Mary. On the right side. What came out of that piercing? Blood and water. Funny that. It could be just a coincidence. Or it could be something very interesting indeed. Because elsewhere, and we've looked at this over the weeks that we've been in this journey together, Jesus saw himself primarily as the new temple, doing for Israel and indeed the whole world all that God had dreamed the temple would be. The meeting place between heaven and earth. And here, in this wonderful image, we find the source of our river, the cross. Have you ever had one of those moments where you've sat and looked at the cross? You look at a picture of the cross and you go, well, I know what it looks like. May I've watched a film or whatever, Passion of the Christ or whatever. I know what it is. But there's something about sitting and waiting and watching. One of the things I love about the way Kay Friend, who's a reader in this church, does on Good Friday is she puts together with Paul, her husband, and Martin often gets roped in one way or another, and there's a 3-hour vigil. 3 hours between 12 and 3 with pictures and readings and music and silence. And it's the most powerful time. I come in here and I sit, and it's a great opportunity, I'm sure Howard might agree with me, where people like hear me, we don't have to speak. We can just sit and be, and it's beautiful when we can do that, isn't it? But when we can, do you know what I find? I find almost my breath is taken away. Have you ever had that where you feel you can't almost breathe properly or deeply? Because there's something going on, something powerful, something amazing that I'm getting towards the source of life. Strangely, in the death of Jesus upon the cross. Next one, please. Now, what can happen, of course, is this now in the modern day has to fit in with everything else. You go to a bookshop like Waterstones or whatever, and you look on the bookshelves about under the section spirituality, and believe it or not, there are literally hundreds of books. I went down Western not so long ago to check this out, and there are hundreds of books on spirituality. You can find many, many different spiritualities and how-to books, self-attainment books, how to be a better person, how to discover a more perfect you. And of course, in amongst all that, guess what? I found one Bible. That's it. And if you even go to church, what can happen is, without knowing it, strangely, this churchy world that we so love, and so lovely to see so many of you here today, both people I know well, people who I'm meeting maybe for the first time, welcome everybody, is that actually church can crowd in on this place of meeting. Isn't that strange? Church meetings, doing things around church. One of the things, on the other hand, I would want to put a caveat for is the fact that some people, flower ladies on a Friday, people who come and clean and stuff like that, often when they're cleaning or when they're arranging the flowers, this is their prayer time. Have you ever found that? Ruth, have you found that when you're doing the brass? Strangely, in the cleaning, it becomes a rhythm. And in the rhythm, becomes something more than what you're doing. And it's beautiful. But don't confuse church with your spirituality. Church can become very churchy. And strangely, many people have come to church, people who may be joining us online at home, have come to church in the hope of meeting with the living God. And they actually find all the other things, but not that. For some people, they say the closest they get to it is when they come and receive communion, or when they have a particular song, or when they perhaps have the choir in between all the words. But we need to follow this river and trying to find its source. And its source is in the form of the person of Jesus. And that person of Jesus is the person who lives and loves and will be willing to die for you again and again and again. Next one, please. Strangely, though, I find even here, when you strip everything else away, a strange sort of conversation takes place. Because when we come to the source of the river and we look at the face of Christ and we look at the person of Jesus upon the cross, I wonder what you see. Because it may be that through Sunday school or whatever, through the history of your knowledge, of your experience, the cross is meant to be a place where you bring all your sin, all the things you've done wrong. And so, strangely, when you come to a place like this, rather than being a place of life and of new life, it becomes a place of guilt, of shame, of embarrassment, of feeling inadequate. And people who desperately need that new life, if they have low self-worth, can actually end up feeling in a stranger place, a darker place. You wouldn't be alone if when you've stood at the face of the cross or at the foot of the cross, you felt as though, woe is me, who am I? And the church has perpetuated that. Certain branches of the church, parts of the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church and the Evangelical Church have perpetuated that. But I love an old book, which I've lent to somebody. I was going to read some of it to you, but I've lent it to somebody, so I can't. And it's called A Hidden Fire by a gentleman called Brother Ramon. And at the very back, in the back pages, he quotes a wonderful little vignette, a cameo of a conversation between two people, Brother A and Brother B. And Brother A says, when I come to the foot of the cross, I feel so wretched. I feel as though, I remember everything I've done and how it's me who's put him there and nailed him to the tree. And Brother B says, well, I find that very strange. Because when I come to the foot of the cross, I find healing, redemption, new life, and the fact that I know I'm profoundly loved. And it oscillates between these two positions. It comes from something like the 14th century. And of course, what you find out in the end is it's one and the same person. you, me. But sometimes even here, the church has emphasized the negative without also helping you to see the positive. And the positive is life-changing. But we need to come, and to a certain extent, we need to come alone. One-on-one with this living, loving God who did it 2,000 years ago, who said on Mount Moriah, Temple Mount, come and drink. I'll give anyone a drink if only they'll come. My question to you here today, the question to everyone at home, the question to myself, in amongst all our churchiness, I still remember somebody I met down the road at the shop. They said, "Oh, it must be lovely being a vicar. Must be lovely being a vicar," they said. "You get an opportunity to pray for 8 hours a day." Caroline, I felt about that big. Oh, bless you. For those at home, Caroline's just made me feel about that big. Because she's amazing. But the point is, can you come with all your inadequacies? That you've only got 10 minutes rather than 8 hours. But will you still come? Will you surrender something of yourself to this person again? You may have been a Christian for many, many years. You may have sat in this church or other churches. You may have done this over and over again. But strangely, it's still amazing to find the source of life itself. But will you come? This is the heart of our Christian spirituality. This is the place where we need to come. Howard and I are quite involved with the Franciscan tradition, so's Johnny. And of course, one of the things he discovered, Francis of Assisi this is, and it often does take this, doesn't it? When we get to that moment of crisis, when you hear a talk like this, or you hear other people talk much more eloquently or whatever, but it's often when you get to that place where everything else is stripped away. It's very hard to strip it away ourselves. It's much easier in a way if other things happen, redundancy, illness, whatever, bad times. And strangely, there are many people, and you wouldn't be the first, that's found yourself sat in this church wondering what it's all about and looking at that cross. Strangely, in that moment, as Francis of Assisi discovered, that he heard the very voice of God. As he looked at the cross in San Damiano that day, looking for what God wanted from him as he sought to follow him, one-on-one, he discovered who he truly was. And of course, the rest of Francis' story is legendary. We may not be Francis of Assisi, but we are who we are. And we all have a place here. And as I said at the beginning, I'll close at the end. Isn't it wonderful that a waterfall is a gift? Do you find that? There's nothing you can do about it. Isn't that great? It just is. It just pours out water. All these ice waters, in this case from the Mount Hermon, which is a great mountain, flood through this place, and they just pour out. Come winter, come summer, come hot, come cold, they just are. Really annoying for business, isn't it? Because you can't do anything with it. It just is. Because it comes to you as gift. I know there are many Christian bookshops. Christians always have. Do you remember, I think I've told you before, One of the great things was when, I'm sure this didn't happen to you, Howard, but when they moved me here, Jan and I here, some years ago now, the removal man said, "What is it with you vicars? Why do you have so many boxes of books? I thought you only needed one." Even our intellects can strangely be a barrier to our coming. That's why Jesus was absolutely clear. It is for everyone. Whoever you are, whatever your background, whether you've been here many times or whether you've not been here at all, whether you feel you're worthy or whether you feel that you're the worst person on earth, whether you feel as though everything's good or whether you feel as though everything is going completely wrong, no matter your intellect, your sexuality, whoever you are, everyone is welcome. And I find that mind-blowing. All he asks is you to come and be willing to drink, willing to spend time, willing to receive. We'll look forward to part 2 next week. Thank you for listening.